originally from Toledo. He spent the latter part of his life in northern Wisconsin. Now, Fred Prentice got married 3 times. The last time fairly late. He was in his 70s. As a surprise gift for his 3rd wife, he built, it was a beautiful 3-story mansion. It used to be just in from the point we're coming to. It was 3 stories with an observation tower, all covered in cedar shingles. The building eventually came to be known as the Cedar Park Lodge. Once it was finished, he brought his wife out, surprised her with it. She was surprised, but not very pleasantly. Mr. Prentice is in his 70s and looking forward to retiring out here. His 3rd wife was a much younger socialite from New York City. Apparently not so much looking forward to retiring out yet. Very little ice on the lake. Without ice, water is able to evaporate from the lake all winter long, which is pretty normal. It's normal for the lake level to drop during the winter. It usually reaches its low point in March. It got extra low this past year. And then the last thing that happened, we got very little snowfall last year. But usually in the spring, all the snow that we've gotten all winter long melts, runs back into the lake, and the lake level jumps up. That just didn't happen this year. When the snow melted, there was very little of it. The lake didn't come up the way it usually does. Net result, early May of this year, the lake was about 14 inches lower than it had been a year earlier. It's still, I checked just earlier this week, we're about 10 inches below where we were at this time a year ago. We did get some pretty good rainfall in June of this year, so it came up somewhat. But again, still 10 inches below where it used to be. Net result, we can see that opening at the base of Lookout Point really for the first time in about 10 years. Lake level's not really low, right? It's actually a couple inches below the long-term average. Overall, in an average year, the lake level might fluctuate maybe a foot from the high point in late summer to the low point in late winter. But a little bit more of a swing this past year. The overall, from the record high to the record low is about 4 feet. The census for the bears, the way they count them, the method they come up with, is kind of interesting. So they start off by, they build sort of a little corral, barbed wire. That's what happened out here. So this bear started coming around people looking for handouts. They didn't really get aggressive at all, but to stop that from happening, the first thing they do is just throw them around. And they do have a crew that'll come out here. They've got these teams that they worked on training the bears to be here. But the old dock, it had gotten old, and it was actually starting to fall apart. So early this summer, there was a construction crew that came out here. They tore out the old dock. They came out after that, and they put in the new cribbing, the big, those 12-inch square timbers all pinned together. Those are called cribs. They set those in the lake and then fill them with rocks. And they let those settle for a month or so. Then they were out here a couple weeks ago, and they started putting the top of the dock on, all of those beams that are running perpendicular to the shore. We thought they were just about done, but then I guess they had something else to work on, so they left. So all that's left now is to put the new top of the dock on, which hopefully is going to be coming sometime soon. But that's why that orange snow fencing and all that yellow ribbon is up to just keep people away from because of the fact that there's not an entire dock here. As far as the fish camp, though, the group of buildings, the main bunkhouse is a building kind of straight off the end of the dock. For the most part, that's where the fishermen would have lived while they were out here. Left of that, down the shore a little bit, there are a couple of net drying reels. So from here, that's the things that look sort of like window frames without glass in them. There are 2 of these reels side by side. Older nets the fishermen used were made of natural fibers. Commonly, it was a cotton thread. They had to dry these out before they stored them. If they stored wet nets, the nets would have rotted. When fishermen got back here with wet nets, they would begin by winding them up on these reels. As they wound the net into the reel, they could patch whatever was torn, and then being on the reels allowed the nets to dry pretty quickly. The next 3 buildings after those drying reels were used mainly for storage, although occasionally those were additional bunkhouses. They sometimes had as many as about 30 men out here. Now that was kind of rare. That was generally only a few weeks in November for the herring season. More commonly, most of the year, they would have been fishing for lake trout and whitefish. And during those times, really there were never more than at most half a dozen people here at any given time. While fishermen were out here, commonly every couple of days, a larger boat would have come from Bayfield, made the rounds to several different camps, collecting all the fish that had been caught, and would have dropped off ice for them to cool fish for the next week.
Devil's Island here, most northern part of Wisconsin. Get to the other side of Devil's Island, we'll see the cave, sea cave. Get another shot of that.
Here, about where we are, you can see the stone changes a little bit. Then becoming a a little bit of a richer orange. Well, this is a different type of stone. This is what's called the Devil's Island Formation. It's still sandstone, but it's a little bit older and a little bit softer. And you can tell that it underlies most of the ions. And it's kind of the softness of the stone, combined with the exposure of the open water, that is the formation of these caves. There are also sea caves. There's a little strip of them that runs through kind of the middle of the sand island, and those mainland caves. What all three of those places have in common is exactly the same type of stone as sand island still work, although they are completely automatic now. Sometimes there are people out here in the lighthouses. For the most part, it's volunteers. They live right at the lighthouse during the busy part of the summer, and they're here to get tours to anyone who stops in. No one out here right now, no. So we are just about where the main body of the caves are. We're going to slow to an idle, and we'll work our way around the far side of the cave. We'll turn and we'll pass them again. When we make the second pass, talk a little bit more about the lighthouse. See, biggest caves are 50 feet or so into the back end of the very biggest ones. As we've been idling here in water about 20 feet deep, drops to that pretty much right where the island starts. The zone continues just about straight down for about 20 feet. So we can get in pretty close without any trouble. The lighthouse here at Devil's Island, this was the last of the 6 light stations out here to have gone into operation. This one first operated in 1891. It was also the last one to be automated. And for the most part, lighthouses here in the islands were automatic by about World War II, give or take. This one, though, in addition to being a lighthouse, was also a Coast Guard station. So if the Coast Guards were here, they just turned the light on when it got dark and shut it off in the morning. Finally, it was 1978. They moved the Coast Guardsmen into the station in Bayfield, automated the lighthouse at that point. When we're back to where you can see the very top of the light tower, you're going to notice there's a couple of weather vanes up there on a sort of a T-shaped bar. That's part of an automated weather station. There are weather stations out here scattered along the lake shore about every 20 miles or so. There are also a number of buoys on the open water with similar equipment on them. The weather stations, obviously enough, are collecting weather data. Air temperature, wind speed and direction, barometric pressure. The buoys also measure water temperature and wave height. All that information gets sent out in radio signals picked up by the National Weather Service. They can tell what the weather's like all across the lake and don't actually need anyone here to monitor it. Just in front of the light tower is what looks like an old radio tower. That is an old radio tower. It used to broadcast something called a radio beacon. Radio beacons are part of an outdated direction finding system. So boats that had the right receivers could pick up signals from these beacons. They could tell exactly what direction the signal was coming from. Then they could use that. If they could pick up signals from 2 or preferably more of these beacons, they could triangulate their position. These days we use GPS, which is it's faster and easier and a lot more accurate. In a couple of minutes, we're going to turn again. We're going to get a little bit farther out, and once we're farther away, you'll be able to look back and see the buildings here a little bit better. You may have noticed along the shore there are a bunch of little, small trees and even shrubs with little clusters of orange berries on them. Those are mountain ash. Usually they form into bigger trees, but here in the northern end of the Devil's Island, they just kind of weather beat. They don't get very big for the most part. And there's a really good crop of the ash berries right now. Now, technically they're edible, but they're not good at all. They're really bitter. Birds eat them. Next to us here, there's a white building with a green roof. That used to house the fog signal. There are no working fog horns out here anymore. They're just really not needed these days. A little bit to the left of the light here, you may have spotted at least the roof of a small brick building. Looks sort of like an outhouse. Actually, though, that was the fuel storage building. Every lighthouse had one of these oil sheds. They're very heavily constructed. They're made of multiple layers of brick. The inside is lined with steel. The roof is made of steel, and the roof is only kind of loosely connected. These were designed so that if their fuel were to have caught fire and caused an explosion, what would hopefully have happened is that the roof would have blown off and away from everything else. But at worst, they would have lost their fuel, but hopefully not have destroyed anything else or injured anyone. Then there are the two buildings that look like houses. And these were used as homes by the lightkeepers. The one for the head keeper and his family, the other one for the assistant keeper. Lightkeepers, they generally lived out here with their families. They were commonly on the islands about mid-April through late November. Sometimes maybe a little bit earlier in the year or a little bit later, depending on the weather. Whenever it was nice enough that there was shipping traffic, lightkeepers had to be here to keep the lights operating. Basically, whenever the lake was not frozen, there were lightkeepers here. As we start to turn, you can see on this part of the island, just ahead of us a little bit, there's a flat ledge of stone. This is one of the landings out here. Several different places, small boats can get in and drop people off to visit the lighthouse. This one is called the East Landing. It's just east of the lighthouse. There is also a West Landing. And on the complete opposite end beyond where we are now is the South Landing.
Nice living quarters.
The lighthouse here at Raspberry first operated in 1863. It was built here to mark the entrance to what's called the West Channel, which is basically just the part of the lake between the mainland and the first of the islands. We're going to be traveling through the West Channel for the rest of our trip today. The lighthouse itself is a duplex. As we get directly in front of it, you can see that it's symmetrical from side to side. The right side of the building was used as the home of the head lightkeeper. The left side, though, was actually further divided upstairs and down, split between the first and second assistant keepers. There's access to that central light tower from upstairs and down on either side of the building. The red brick building originally housed a fog signal. First of all, they had a boiler there that produced steam powered a diaphone. A diaphone is a horn that sounds two separate tones. Eventually, they replaced that with a diesel-powered fog signal, then eventually electric. They got the first electricity out here was in the late 1920s. The light was fully electrified by about 1940. And then when it was electric, it was mostly powered by batteries. The batteries were charged by a generator. Before they had electricity out here, the light was an oil lamp. It was first whale oil, later kerosene, before they finally got the electricity out here. The modern light, the one that actually flashes now, is right in front of the brick building. So right about the roof line, just in front of the dormer, there's a very small clear plastic lens. Just beneath the lens is a solar panel that charges the batteries, and the batteries are beneath that in a large white box. The Coast Guard maintains the working lights out here. So here at Raspberry, just what's on that post in front of the brick building, that's Coast Guard. These days, they come out just once every 3 years, and they replace the batteries. They'll come out if somebody reports something being wrong, but nothing's ever wrong with these lights, they just work. Everything else out here, other than that post in front of the brick building, that's the responsibility of the Park Service. The park has done some major restoration work out here at all of these lighthouses, but particularly right here at Raspberry. The first thing they did here was to build up the shoreline. Before then, the shore in front of the lighthouse looked the way it does now off to the right. Very steep clay banks and eroding pretty quickly. The park was concerned. They had figured the rate was eroding. They didn't do something about it. They thought there was a reasonably good chance that within 15 to 20 years, by about now, that the lighthouse may have been falling into the lake. So beginning in 2002 they started. They had a construction crew out here. They hauled out all the stone that's piled here. Now that took the entire first season. That stone was hauled out one barge load at a time from Washburn, which is about 20 miles away. So it took a while. The second season they spent filling it above that, first with a whole bunch of sand, and then eventually topsoil. And then they got the plants growing here to hold it all in place. But then after they got the shore stabilized, they started working on the lighthouse itself. They put a new roof on it. That's all metal roofing. They replaced all of that. They replaced some of the siding. Some of it was in pretty bad shape, so they replaced the worst of the siding. On the interior, they stripped all the finishes off. They restored it now to be in about the condition it would have been in during the 1920s, what they were shooting for. They tried to do it as accurately as possible. Chemically analyzed the wood finishes so they could reproduce them. Looked at a bunch of photographs to identify the furniture they had here. They replaced that as much as possible with actual antique furnishings. They had botanists look at pictures of the grounds to try to identify the plants that were growing here so they could replant the gardens accurately. Lighthouse was closed for a couple of years while they were doing that restoration work. It's been reopened now for 18 years since that restoration was done. It's closed for the season at this point, but busier season, well, pretty much Memorial Day through Labor Day. There's someone out here. There's usually one park ranger and then one or sometimes two volunteers.
Oak Island. And Minnesota mainland again. Down through a channel. Basswood Island here. Going around Minnesota shoreline and Red Rock Point.
So we get just about all the way around Red Cliff Point. You can see Red Cliff Bay out to our right. Back in the end of it, there's a little marina there. It's the Schooner Bay Marina. It's named for a large schooner type of sailboat that used to operate out of there. During the winter, this part of the lake usually freezes. It's pretty common for us to get a foot or two of ice and clean on it. So even if we don't like to get a shot. The apple harvest is just a bit on these two of the orchards here make their own farm site, which is the Wiggins. There's also a winery kind of in the middle of the orchards. And then up the river, there's a distillery. And just about all the rivers, they serve the whole paper.
Heading out to Madeline Island now. The doing a lot of road construction there, so this great big trailer full of hot tar is going to be coming on board with us. I wonder if he's going to be the only car they let on or what. It's got to be a lot of weight to put on this poor little ferry. Oh, Jesus. Here we go. It's only about a 10-minute trip, so. I'm going to check out the museum when we get there.